Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Michel Berthelemy. I will be the moderator for our first panel today, where we'll be trying to tackle the also important question of nuclear financing. Before giving a few words of introduction, let me invite my panelists on stage. First, turning to Monsieur Arnaud Montebourg, who is a former Minister of Industry in France, and now the Chairman of Alfeor, who is bringing a perspective on industrial policy and the importance of building resilient local supply chain. Mr. Montebourg. I will then turn to Markus Rauramo, who is the President and CEO of Fortum from Finland, but also the President of Eurelectric in Brussels, and who will speak on the conditions that make new nuclear attractive to private investors and the importance of risk-sharing models in the norming market. Markus? Turning now to Boris Schucht, who is the CEO of Urenco, representing the backbone of the nuclear fuel supply chain and a strong advocate for long-term policy and customer contract as a driver for investments. Now, from KHNP with deep expertise in both domestic and international new project development and financing. Now to my good friend Issam Taleb of EY-Parthenon, who leads strategic thinking on nuclear financing and has coordinated several publications on this subject, including one on nuclear financing that is launching today. And last but not least, Jasbir Sidhu, who is from Nuclear Capital in the UK, with a focus on unlocking institutional capital for advanced reactors and new build. So now that everybody is on stage, it's my pleasure to welcome you all for this panel. And our discussion today are both going to be timely and essential, as nuclear sector stands at a pivotal moment, ready to play a major role in global decarbonization and to boost energy security, yet still facing significant challenges when it comes to aligning the capital needed across the nuclear value chain. And by that, we mean that we're going to talk about the investment needed for nuclear new build, but also the crucial investments needed for the nuclear supply chain. This event builds, to some extent, directly on the momentum from one event that we hosted at the NEA back in September, the Roadmaps to the Nuclear Ministerial Conference, where we saw a clear consensus. The appetite of nuclear is growing, and so is the recognition that innovative financing is key condition for progress. At the event, we heard repeatedly that private capital is not only interested, but ready to engage, but only if the right conditions and frameworks are in place. We also heard clearly that new prospective end users, such as data centers and tech companies, are ready to play the part to get nuclear financing on track. And I think it's fair to say this is a significant change from just a couple of years ago, where, just to be frank, we would struggle to get financiers on stage to talk about nuclear. And yet not commit to financing. And so the message is clear. If we offer predictability, risk mitigation, and robust policy frameworks, the nuclear financing community will step up to help deliver the next wave of nuclear projects. So with that, I will now turn to my panel for a first series of questions. This is very much aimed to be conversational, so I really encourage my fellow panelists to interact and have a discussion. And we'll start this discussion by talking about the nuclear supply chain. It's, I think, fair to say that in recent years, the policy debate often has focused heavily on financing new nuclear power plants and has sometimes overlooked the specific challenges facing the nuclear supply chain. So I will first turn to Issam, Arnaud, and Boris. And from your standpoint, what do you see as the biggest challenges? and also the opportunity when it comes to nuclear financing the nuclear power supply chain, in particular the role of public-private partnerships to help build resilience and scale. So I'd love to hear practical insights from each of you, and maybe I'll turn to Issam first, and then Arnaud and Boris.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Issam Taleb. I'm a partner within EY, and as Michel said earlier, we published today a global study on nuclear financing. So happy to share with you this announcement this morning. In this study, we try to see how to make investment in nuclear value chain attractive not only for public sector, public funding, but also private funding. And that's a major shift we observe. In this study, we try to cover the whole value chain from upstream activities, of course, fuel supply, project infrastructures, but also the supply chain. And most of the time when we discuss with investors, we often focus on infrastructure and the reactor project development, but the supply chain is not always in the mind of the investors. So what we observe actually is that investing in the supply chain is both attractive for investors, private and public. Why? Because for states and public funding, the supply chain is hard to delocalize. It's a high value added activity in critical industries, and therefore a potential sovereignty for the national supply chain. And when you look at the supply chain, but I guess my colleagues here will also react on that. When you look at the French supply chain, for example, only 30% of their turnover is exposed to a nuclear value chain. What does it mean? It means that when you look at the risk profile of these SMEs in the supply chain, only 30% of their business is toward the nuclear industry. So the perceived risk of investors on this type of industry is actually lower than is actually higher than the reality of the business. Because the supply chain serves, of course, the nuclear industry, but they also serve aeronautics, defense, railway, etc. So that's a major topic I wanted to share this morning, because when we talk about the supply chain and the numerous companies you have in France, for example, in this industry, not most of them are highly exposed to nuclear.
Arnaud, you are doing it. How do you view the challenges and opportunities?
Thank you for your invitation. You know, we have had in France a kind of politic winter in nuclear choices. And the revival of nuclear has changed everything, because we have a supply chain very fragile, lack of capital, suspicion from the investors. The banking system is not very favorable in all Europe, not only in France, to SMEs because of the BAL, the third agreement. Remember that the United States have got rid of this BAL 3, as we say here, and talking with Mrs. Lagarde, the president of the central bank, European Central Bank, she said, you know, we want to be examples to the world. That's the reason why we still have BAL the third. And that's the reason why we have problem with the banking system to finance and take part significant of the risk finances SMEs. That's a problem in aeronautics, in defense, everywhere. And I don't talk about ESG, which is one constraint more. And I would say two things. The first is, if there is big contracts on the large plants, that gives to the state a vertical solidarity between the top and the bottom, there might be some changes. The vertical solidarity may be very useful if you don't accede to the lending system, and if you don't have the means to get investors. And that's what's happening now. I would say that public financial has to learn risk. On SMEs, they do not. They are frightened. They are hesitating. I will finance, but not so much. But they have to choose a technologic orientation. They have to choose a technologic cost, and they have to accept crashes, even in face of the public opinion. These are the problems of today. Of course, all the governments who has no more money want to do it. But it's difficult to change the rules, because rules have been made for decades somewhere else, in Europe, in multilateral agreements, and that's the reason why we have little problems to solve.
Boris, you have a strong footprint and historical footprint in Europe, but you're also very present in the US. How do you see things?
First of all, just one. Now it works. Perfect. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, everybody. I want to be a little bit more optimistic than the two previous colleagues on the panel. First of all, when we have seen what happened in Sizewell C, I'm really impressed. There are now the first time financial investors on a large-scale nuclear power plant investment on the table, sitting on the table, financing there nearly the half of the investment. That's a very, very good sign. Why do I mention it? And that is for the whole supply chain. And I come back to the fuel chain in a few seconds. True for the whole supply chain. First of all, I believe momentum. Momentum means, you know the animal, the lemming, the small lemmings? There was a film, a Disney film in the 50s. This one is not working very well, so in the 50s, there was a film in the 50s where one lemming was jumping over a cliff and all the other ones were filming. They're not doing that in reality, but since then, actually, at least in the German language, we are saying you're like acting like lemmings when you're following each other. And the same is happening in the financial sector. Yeah, when money is going in one direction, other money will follow. And we are seeing that. We see that already today. What is important for that, and that is driving the momentum, that is I would say, the political willingness to push for something. Tripling nuclear, this commitment of saying tripling nuclear, that creates momentum. But it's not only a political ambition anymore, it's now step by step, country by country, translated into business and political actions. And that creates momentum, and momentum attracts money. The second thing that is needed is stability, and that means that are all in our fuel chain part, but also for the nuclear power plants and the supply chain, long-term investments. So we need to know for a pretty long time that societies want us. When the opinion is changing in 5 years again, then of course it's difficult to attract money. But that's connected, once again, with momentum. What we can see today is that by the strong push of 31 governments signing a pledge of tripling nuclear power, that is creating the momentum that gives also, that convinces investors, that convinces the market for stability. The next thing I wanted to mention are the right instruments. On the fuel chain, just to be very clear, we don't need subsidies. Subsidies are poison. We love subsidies when we get them and not our competitors, but in principle, subsidies are not very helpful. And my clear advice, that is true for the whole nuclear sector. Yeah, we need the right framework. We need the right regulatory framework, for example, on financial regulation. We need the right things like the stupid taxonomy debate that we have had a few years ago here in Europe, where these kind of things need to be solved in the right way, so that we have the right framework, the right instruments in place. Then I'm 100% sure that we can finance actually our investments. To come back on ourselves in the fuel cycle, all the investments that we have made and our competitors have made in the Western world are fully market-based so far. We never received one single euro on subsidies. All the investments that have been made for enrichment plans were fully done and privately financed based on long-term contracts and market-based decisions. There's only one exemption now, that is on high SLEU, because there was a chicken and egg problem to be solved. There was no market, but there was a need for the first material. And that is something where I have some sympathy that the government step in, but only there. And last but not least, it's of course also connected to some technological criteria and our own track record as an industry. We ourselves in the fuel cycle, we don't have this problem. Our lead times are typically only a few years. So when we take an investment decision, we are normally fulfilling of what we are promising. So I don't remember any project in our core enrichment part where we have been really delayed. So normally when we promise this plant will be there at that point of time, it is there at that point of time. We all know that is not true for all parts of the industry. So that is something where we have to do our homework. And of course, it's easier for the financial market to invest and to support investments for smaller tickets and for shorter lead term times. But however, history has shown that you can also finance very large investments with long lead times. So that's why I think we should not be afraid. An optimistic outlook on that, and you see already the momentum that is currently created is also arriving on the financial sector. We get more calls than ever before from the financial sector. Can we invest in you? How can we support you? That are the good news of today.
Thank you very much, Boris, for this optimistic message. Let me now turn, talking about building on time and on cost, let me now turn to nuclear new build. I will turn primarily to Markus and Insik to give an audience maybe an order of magnitude when it comes to financing nuclear new build. A good reference point is the pink document that the European Commission has published earlier this year, the Nuclear Illustrative Program. And they estimate that we need about 250 billion euros of investment in Europe by 2050 to meet what they see as a long-term potential for nuclear energy in the European electricity mix. And of course, you will expect additional investments across the world. So looking at Markus and Insik, your companies, KHNP and Fortum, operate in very different markets, of course. But yet, I expect you still have you share a lot of comments in common when it comes to making these investments and considering this investment in new nuclear. So what do you think are the key ingredients for successful partnerships between the public and the private for enabling this large-scale nuclear new build? Markus, you have the mic, so maybe you go first.
Yeah, thank you, Michel. Thank you for all the colleagues, and thanks for being here. As a background first, so I'm nowadays the CEO of Fortum, and we are a hydro and nuclear producer. We have 9 nuclear reactors, either partly owned or fully owned. And what's behind also the 250 billion that you mentioned is new customer demand. So customers need clean power. The way we are, as a company, we are approaching that is that we have a formidable pipeline of renewables, 8 gigawatts in permitting, a lot more in other stages, a lot of flexibility under development, batteries, demand-side response, as well as pumped hydro. And the needs that our customers are indicating to us are so huge that we have to have nuclear also on the agenda. That's why we have the new nuclear. So we are studying both large reactors and SMRs. As a backdrop to the question, so of course there's theory and then there's practice. So with our part-owned company TVO, we just finalized an EPR 1600 Olkiluoto 3 in Finland. So the first reactor in Europe since a very long time. And it was a 6 billion project, so not very expensive compared to where Hinkley Point or Sizewell would be today. But it was financed fully on the public market. No government intervention, no public intervention, fully merchant basis. So I thought that this could be an interesting experience to share. So how was that done? And 3 key elements. The first one, and I think that applies both for new nuclear as well as any other business. So first of all, visibility on the cash flows. Sounds very simple, but that's the key. And the way in TVO, also Oskarshamn Forsmark Ringhals, how it is done that the owners are also the off-takers. So there's a binding commitment to off-take all produced power at cost plus. So then the company knows that we have full visibility. We will cover always all of our costs. The second key point is technology. Again, sounds very simple, but the key thing for TVO was that there was a fixed price EPC contract from a reliable supplier who everybody could rely on that eventually they can and they will deliver, which Areva, Siemens, Framatome, EDF did. So certainty on the price and time is critical. Of course, in this case, there were significant time delays, which takes me to the third point, which is then the equity risk. So the customers, the technology supplier will ask that, so who puts in the equity if there are overruns? And lucky for us in the bond documentation, TVO for decades has had a provision that the company has to have 25% solvency. And the shareholders will put always money to keep the solvency at 25%. So then you get then the borrowing works. You have the cash flows, you have the technology at a certain cost, and there's certainty that there will be equity. And all of this was done in a private consortium, private companies, private financing. And that gets me to the public part. So, okay, so is public needed? Not necessarily. This can all be done privately. But public parties, EU, national governments, have the possibility to do things that are not available in the private market. So types of governmental CFDs, regulated asset base, as was mentioned, construction time loans and guarantees. And these are, of course, tying up capital for 10, 15 years is something that's quite difficult for private companies to do. Can be done, but it's expensive. Guarantees, so who guarantees to a technology supplier that the customer will be there after 15 years? And then providing visibility on the cash flows, CFDs, regulated asset base. So certainly risk sharing, risk mitigation is possible. And to Boris's good point, so I agree on the point that per se, we are not also as an owner, operator, subsidies is not what we would like to see, but rather using the risk-sharing capabilities that various parties have. But this is a package how things can get done, and there's living proof of that. I a little bit put the Eurelectric hat on at this point as well, so when we then imply this to the whole European utility business, so Eurelectric is representing 34 countries with 3,500 companies, and we all, and many of us are here, so we have a track record of mobilizing hundreds of billions, if not trillions of capital. So we have a track record that we can do it, of course. We are well capable of doing it, and we can either do it fully on our own risk, or then governments and EU and other institutions can take off some risk, lower the cost of capital, and speed things up. But then visibility, transparency to all of these elements is critical. So having, for example, this panel here, create shared understanding of what are the levers we can pull, how can we advance things faster. But I'm very hopeful that this absolutely can be done.
Many thanks for that. So now I'm going to turn to Mr. Park. You have an impressive track record in building nuclear power plants, of course, domestically, but also abroad. What are the key lessons learned you can share with us, and how do you think it's moving forward?
Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Insik from KHNP. KHNP, Korea Hydro Nuclear Power Company. I'm in charge of overseas global nuclear business, including export of SMRs and large-scale nuclear power plants and the ongoing Dukovany project in Czechia and more. Yeah. Let me briefly introduce my company, KHNP. As the only reactor operator in Korea, and we currently operate 26 reactors. We are proud to produce about 1/3 of Korea's electricity, playing a vital role in economic growth by providing reliable and affordable energy. Let's turn to the topic, key elements of a successful partnership between public and private stakeholders. First, government role is very crucial for successful collaboration between the public and private sectors. Nuclear power projects, as you know, have long timelines. They are easily exposed to policy and market changing for a long period of time. Only the government can manage these changes most effectively. If the government accelerates the financing and licensing process, a project can be carried out more quickly and in a more stable manner. The US government recently announced its support for financing and licensing for faster deployment of new nuclear power plant. Once the government clearly sets the policy direction and takes the lead, the private sector can participate based on trust. Consistency in government policy is also crucial. Policy changes can result in project delays or pause. These changes bring high risk to the investors. When a project is suspended, government should consider compensation measures or legal frameworks to clarify project execution. In other words, the private sector can participate once the government takes on the risk and keeps its policies consistent. Now I'd like to explain how utilities, government, and industry can help creating an innovative financing model. Host government can encourage private investors to participate through government guarantees, investment incentives, or PPA, power purchase agreement. Utilities and industry should participate as equity investors, only on for stable financing and serve as long-term off-takers. Recently, power demand is increasing in the development of artificial intelligence, and the development of SMR is expanding. In line with these trends, the role of private investment will become more important for securing new technologies. Let me now turn to the regulatory system for EPC contractors' perspective. Regulatory issues arise often because the requirements of regulatory bodies vary by country. Such difference leads to delays in obtaining construction and operation permits, and in the end, cost overruns. This makes the project more uncertain. In order to resolve this issue, host government should clearly write the regulation in the bidding document and communicate closely with the EPC contractors. In addition, the countries have different regulatory environments. Regulatory bodies of exporting and host governments should cooperate and share information on licensing process. With such policy support and regulatory risk mitigation, private investors can gain great confidence in project stability. All of these efforts will help make sure nuclear projects will be completed on time within budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Park, for sharing with us this great wisdom. I have a quick follow-up questions because I was seized by what you say, Markus, on the fact that utilities in Europe have a track record in mobilizing billions, if not trillions, for investments. And what you said, Boris, about what you're already doing and putting in motion without government subsidies. Whilst at the same time, I hear from Arnaud that when it comes to SMEs, struggle a bit more. So I'm just wondering if anyone had some thought about how the main nuclear players, the utilities, the first-tier nuclear supply chain companies, how much there is a role to play to help pave the way for the investments for the rest of the nuclear supply chain. So anyone want to tackle this question?
Yeah, no, overall question. So thanks for the follow-up. I was reflecting on a couple of points. So Arnaud raised or described our situation as having been in the winter. So I would say that this momentum definitely, like looking at our event here and everything that's happening. So winter clearly is turning into spring. So I would say the ice is melting. And on the whole topic of supply chains, financing, people committed, technology, research, momentum is building. So this will also become something that then enables the investments, enables scalability. That goes for conventional SMRs, goes for any other fourth-gen fusion. So there's, and capital is available, that we know. There are trillions and trillions of capital as long as you start to get customer demand, visibility, investments going on. So I see that the critical mass is building. I do, of course, hope that Boris's comment about lemmings, that we are not lemmings and we then fall off the cliff eventually, even if it's not true, but as a metaphor, not very nice. But I go back to also the customer demand. So electrification, decarbonization, they make so much sense. Often it's cheaper, cleaner, more efficient. So there is an underlying customer demand, but it also for the customer investments to happen, the steel, aluminum, chemicals, hydrogen, it will take time for these investments to come into fruition, and then it makes it possible for all of us, KHNP, Urenco, others, to actually do our investments. So, but I think the spring is coming and ice is melting and we are going to the right direction.
Arnaud, maybe you want to respond to that? Does the timeline of the investment of the utilities align with your timelines?
Spring is coming. We're not still in summer. So what's on? And I was thinking about what saying Boris a few minutes ago. He said, subsidies is poison. Remember that when nuclear industry has been funded, it was public money only, everywhere in the world. So there is a new industry that we are funding with little, small reactors. I would say that in many countries, all the people who are saying, oh, it's a business case, it's not the public money, and it's not my money, that may be dangerous. So there is a kind of reassurance that the fact that state is here is not everywhere, but it has a part, first. Secondly, it's important to say that guarantees, system of, it has been, there is a concern on this table about what we should invent, reinvent, or modernize as a counter guarantee, because we know that 100 basis point or 200 basis point on a long-term investment is the double of a single of the price of electricity, because the capex is the price of electricity. So it's important that we could find cheap money. What is cheap money? Taxpayers, as would say Margaret Thatcher. Just joking a little bit, but it means that we need to have some part of cooperation between public and private. This is the theme of this table. And this cooperation has to be reinvented. In France, we have subsidies, but it's not enough. We have a public banking who invest, and they do it not so badly. So to being also optimistic, Boris, I would say that spring's coming, of course. Let's go quickly to the summer.
Boris, you wanted to add something?
A few things to add. No, this one is still not working. A few things to add. First, what is interesting in the US, and that is something which we have not seen for quite a while, is that electricity becomes a scarce commodity. So hyperscalers are nowadays investing heavily in nuclear. Yeah, a few years ago, it started all with a hobby of rich billionaires. All of them have their SMR or ARMR project to actually promote a new technology, which is the first private money. But what we see now is that large companies, the Googles, Microsofts, Amazons and Metas of this world are investing in nuclear. And they're doing that for two reasons. First of all, and we should not forget that was not mentioned in this panel so far, it's a CO2-free technology. And they want to be very clearly CO2-free. And secondly, they have simply a problem where to get electricity from. They need a problem to be solved, and that's why they're investing. And that brings me to a second point. And there's, I think, one thing where we in Europe have to think about, that is our electricity market design. And first of all, I think nuclear needs always to promote as a prerequisite for financing into nuclear that CO2 has a price. And we all know that's not all over the world the case. And in the US, I can see that very well. There, where nuclear is regulated, it works well. Where it's in the market, it had really a problem because it was competing against cheap gas without any price for CO2. But there is a second element that we see in Europe currently, and that is practically that our market design, where we have only an energy-only market, does not bring any value to base load reliable power. And that is something which which is close to the consumer. We are for the renewables building in the moment huge grids, and whoever follows in Central Europe the grid costs in Germany, they have already tripled since 10 years, yeah? And it's only the beginning of the curve, because we have to transport energy very, very long distance and fluctuating energy which is not 24/7 available. That is the advantage of nuclear. Customer close to the customer, so based where the industry sits, and it's 24 hours, 7 days a week. That is the real advantage. And we don't give in the moment a real price to that. And that is, I think, something we as a nuclear sector have to think about, to be a little bit more outspoken on that societies understand what is the value of this reliable, clean, and therefore also cheap technology.
Thank you very much, Boris. Well, talking about subsidies and taxation, let's look at what is needed to attract private capital, particularly when we look at emerging nuclear technologies. And on that, I'll just use my privilege as moderator to add a couple of reference points to the debate. When it comes to SMR, the NE SMR dashboard track progress toward first of a kind SMR deployment, looking beyond technological feasibility, including tracking financing, which is the topic of this panel. And when it comes to financing, the latest number we've compiled suggests that we had so far globally invested about 15 billion euros towards the development of SMR. But when we look at the balance between public and private, 2/3 of that remains public money in terms of grant, in often cost sharing with private sources, but the public is playing a heavy role. Now, there is clearly also the growing appetite from the private sector, as has been outlined by the panelists. but there are also specific challenges ahead of us as the technologies get closer to market. So turning to Jasbir and also looking for the views of Issam, what do you think are the most promising instruments and models to unlock greater private investments in nuclear, particularly towards SMR and advanced technologies to make them a commercial reality? Are we on track to have this project as truly bankable?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Michel and WNE for the opportunity to share some thoughts. And that's a very good question. So far, the discussion has been very enlightening. So I'm a nuclear engineer. I've been studying nuclear engineering just after Chernobyl blew its lid off in April '86. So I've been in the industry 38 years. So the first thing I will say is that this is probably, talking about whether we're in a spring or heading towards a summer, we're definitely not in a winter. I've lived through so many renaissance of nuclear. I definitely think we're heading towards a summer, definitely not a winter. So we're definitely coming out of spring and heading towards a summer. That's the first thing. The next thing is, when you look at the various instruments for finance that are available out there, then in the UK, we've already discussed sizable C in passing, but that was done through a regulated asset-based model, where the off-taker, as in the public, are paying the consumer about £1 a month, £1 GBP per month during the construction phase to provide the constructors with managing their construction risk. So that is a good thing. A RAB model will lend itself to a first-of-a-kind project, if it's available, with SMRs and AMRs as well. So that's one thing to consider. We mentioned policy stability, which Mr. Park talked about, and that is so true. We need governments to declare exactly in their home nations what they expect of the nuclear industry to deliver in terms of the mix of the amount of gigawatts that needs to be generated and what mix is expected of that generation. Because once you start getting policy stability, and it's not just after a 3-4 year cycle, it has to be a 10-year cycle, 15-year cycle, as governments change, then that signals to the investment markets that we are now getting policy stability. The next thing along with policy stability is obviously where do you site these projects? We have existing nuclear sites, new nuclear sites need to come along. Those new nuclear sites need to be declared sooner rather than later so that developers can start thinking about deploying their technology on those sites, whether it's repurposed coal-fired power station sites or other brownfield sites or totally new sites. So policy stability along with planning stability and really signaling that starts now making it more favorable for investors to start thinking about investing in those projects and programs. And then you also need to control revenue volatility during the course of that project. It's one thing giving a CFD like HPC has, Hinkley Point C, strike price agreed back in 2013 of £92.50 index linked. But how do you manage that revenue volatility during that construction phase? Well, that's where something like a regulated asset base process comes in place and provides you with that certainty. And then during that construction phase, there's then the opportunity, and we haven't talked about this, to refinance with green bonds and then start thinking about carbon CFDs if they are available as time goes on during the course of that project. Now, as nuclear capital, we are raising funds to invest in nuclear, trying to raise £500 million of private equity. There is a lot of private equity out there that is looking to invest in nuclear. But let's not forget, nuclear is a new asset class that needs investment. Private equity will mobilize into nuclear because it is necessary. Government balance sheets alone will not deliver the sort of programs that are being broadcast out there in terms of the trillions of investment that is needed. So private capital does need to come. But there's a lot of uncertainty within the way we deliver currently nuclear projects, especially in the West, that needs to be overcome. And the final point I will make, and then we can open up a discussion, is let's not forget that there's the whole insurance industry out there. I'm a nuclear advisor to Lloyd's Syndicate 1176. The syndicate is managed by the Chaucer Group, and the syndicate provides insurance services, nuclear insurance services, to the nuclear industry. So these gentlemen with their amazing assets that are generating or producing fuel, all those assets need some form of either first loss insurance or third-party loss insurance. Now, the insurance industry has woken up to the idea of thinking, what can we do to help look at identify some of those risks that lend themselves to insurance-type products or wraps that can manage those risks. And if the insurance industry can come up with some products, which in the US they're talking about, in the UK we're talking about, then that starts to reduce some of that risk, which then will help attract private equity coming into nuclear projects. The supply chain is essential to be invested in. If you just look at the history of projects in the States, in the UK and further afield, weak supply chains deliver poor quality, not on time, overpriced projects. And that's one of the main reasons is due to weak supply chains. Supply chains can be invested in, but you need program certainty, you need government policy certainty, and you need a program that is investable.
Many thanks for that. Issam, you have the mic. Are you as optimistic that we can get private equity to mobilize on the path they started to open this year?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, I just wanted to react on because I was very surprised when Boris said that I was not optimistic. French people are quite optimistic when it comes to nuclear. So my point was not to say that you should be pessimistic regarding the supply chain, but my point was to say the other way around, that the supply chain is solvable, is ready, and when you look at the risk is low, actually, because they are exposed only to 30% to nuclear. So my point is optimistic, and I wanted to say that again. And we talked a lot about large NPPs. Indeed, we should talk about small modular reactors and advanced modular reactors, and of course the supply chain. I totally agree with my colleague here, Jasbir, because everything you said, actually, I was ready to say it also, and I totally agree with you. I just wanted to highlight 2 or 3 topics. First, when we talk about investors, I mean, investors is, I would say, a common word, but there are many realities behind this. When it comes to large NPPs, of course, we have first public support. It could be funding, but it could be support in the framework, but it could be also, and this is something new, I guess, with the new nuclear, especially SMR and AMRs, you could also rely on patents that come from public agencies. You could rely on skills and previous R&D works that you could also reuse somehow for new designs. So public is fundamental. And you said, Urenco, you had the support also in the UK for the LU new plant. So it is fundamental. And it is fundamental to new nuclear designs, new nuclear ways of financing also. So I totally agree on that topic. For large NPP, you have the public support, but you have infra funds, and you have off-takers also, and operators. When it comes to SMR and AMRs, you have the same, but as you are in a new program, a new R&D, and new ways of constructing, building, delivering, you also can return to VCs, venture capital. And venture capital is quite new in this industry. Part of my job, actually, is to convince VCs, private equity funds, to invest in nuclear assets. And it's not an easy job every day, to be honest with you, because you have to be very convincing in the fact that construction is risky. Construction is long. you said earlier that you have to share the risk during the construction. When you look at the new schemes that are now within Sizewell C or OPG, we did not discuss about OPG and the announcement that I've done some weeks ago. OPG is very interesting, but OPG is working with GE Hitachi on a design that is already somehow well known, and still they have elaborated risk-sharing mechanisms that are quite innovative. But again, if you look at the precise scheme, you need public support and you need public guarantees. But the risk-sharing is new, and it concerns all the stakeholders within the construction phase, with target prices, with incentives to share the risk. And when you look, maybe it's another topic we did not mention yet, but when you look at the first of a kind in SMR, or even in somehow well-known technologies, the first of a kind is always, of course, most expensive. When you look at the announcement of OPGs, the first would be 3.9 billion for Unit 1, and Unit 2, 3, 4 would be around 3 billion. So it's a 25% decrease in the capex from the FOG to the NOC. This is new somehow, and I don't know if for large NPPs it would be the same, but it's a new way of programming nuclear, multi-site, degressivity, leverage on cost optimization. And last topic is the supply chain. And again, here you have another type of investors. The other type of investors could be either the industrials, who are willing to integrate their value chain vertically, or private equity. And again, on private equity, when you discuss with them, the first question is it risky? So my answer is, which risk are you talking about? Is it too nuclear? What does it mean? Because when you build valves, drills, when you have machinery, I mean, at the end of the day, you do not manipulate uranium. You build a machine. So that's something you have. We need to somehow be very educational on that, because the products are the same. Of course, you have a specificity, you need some certification, but at the end, you sell valves, pumps, etc.
Many thanks, Issam. So maybe just to follow up on the question of risk. Obviously, there are the real risk, and there are also the perceived risk. Looking at the different type of investors, do you think we still have a perceived risk issue, or that they are getting a better understanding of nuclear to the point where the perceived risk sort of bias is starting to be somewhat tackled? And I'm happy to hear from the other panelists as well.
Yeah, just a quick reaction on that, and I leave the floor to my colleagues. The perceived risk is changing a lot, and it's changing in more optimistic way and positive way, and it's changing at a very fast pace, actually. 2 years ago, I would say that the private equity contacts we have, the infra funds were not willing to address that market. 1.5 years ago, with the taxonomy evolving, with ESG topics evolving, with as you said, the momentum, the political discourse. For example, I spent many hours just on master classes to educate GPs and LPs in funds about the nuclear industry. So there is indeed a momentum. There is a momentum for new investors and newcomers in the industry. Yesterday, I heard the French minister saying that he is willing and he pushes to attract new investors. WNA is doing the same. Some weeks ago in London, there were many new investors in the WNA Congress. So yeah, it's changing a lot, and maybe you have a feedback on that.
Definitely. So I totally agree with what you're saying there, Issam, because at the end of the day, you've got to remember nuclear is part of our critical national infrastructure. And once you label it as critical national infrastructure, then it starts to mobilize investors thinking, actually, that's not a bad risk to take, given all the other discussion we've had. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, I've noticed that there are many, many more private equity investors really looking at nuclear. There was a moratorium in certain infrastructure funds on investing in nuclear because it was not an asset class that they would touch. That has changed. Banks have woken up to the idea of investing in nuclear and they're eyeing up projects, but they have to be bankable projects. The World Bank is looking at investing in nuclear finally after the first investment they did in 1957. Why is that? Because they realize nuclear is part of the critical national infrastructure, not just for each nation state, but for the world now. So there are many, many players coming into the market. And even if you just look around here today at WNE, I would say from 2 years ago, there are many more financial insurers, legal types who are coming into the industry to mobilize that private equity that is vitally needed to take these projects forward. The 2 quick points which we haven't touched upon is when it comes to developing strong supply chains, one of the things, a signal that's needed is visibility of a potential fleet that will be built after that first of a kind. There is absolutely no point just building one first of a kind. And if you're building a small modular reactor, the key word is modular, built in a factory. You're not going to build a factory to build modules just for that first of a kind. You have to signal from the outset there will be at least either 4 or 5 follow-on projects, but then that starts to give order certainty to that supply chain that is investable either through debt or equity finance and vertical integration of those business has been talked about. Let's not forget visibility of the pipeline is essential as well.
Markus, I think you wanted to add to what was said?
Well, I think my point is building on many things that have been said already. So what I can identify is the cost, very good example of cost of capital. So critical, and cost of equipment. So scalability, modularity. And I take from my point of view, the European level question. So in Eurelectric, we have 3 priorities: customer electrification, security of supply and resilience, and digitalization and AI to actually make it possible also to integrate other types of electricity production than nuclear. In order to integrate renewables, flexibility, customer demand, we need to digitalize and use AI in many more ways than we do today. But then what do the customers need? So clearly there is a need for low-cost, reliable and clean megawatt hours. Nuclear can provide that, but it takes long to build and the supply chains are not established. For the supply chains, if you look at, say, China, US, big markets, one regulation. So this is one thing that Europe, I think, has to take very seriously. We have 27 national regulations, and the scalability gets all that much more difficult in that situation. I'm realistic. I don't expect that we will have one regulation, but at least that we acknowledge the point and address any kind of scalability, modularity that we can get there. That goes then on the supply chain. So often we talk about the main components, the pressure vessels, the steam generators, but it's obviously about the other big parts, turbines, generators, but also the pumps, valves, fuel, everything. So all of that needs to be scalable and the supply chains would need to be established. And that comes back to the risk. So what is the risk that suppliers perceive? What are the risks that the customers are perceiving? On the cost of capital, there is a practical recent example of what governments can do and the government involvement, and that's Sweden. So the Swedish government took a law to the parliament where they have now set up a system of CFDs, construction time loans, and guarantees. Without the exact numbers yet, but the whole thinking is supportive of this. Then final point on the modularity. So the scalability actually I see not only in the SMRs, but the philosophy is very strong with KHNP. with the API 1400. And I think Baraka is a great example of the success, doing the same thing again with the same suppliers, same supply chain. And that required the Emirati regulator to adopt Korean and NRC regulation. EDF with Olkiluoto 3, Flamanville, Taishan, Hinkley Point, Sizewell. But there we see also that modularity is difficult because UK, Finland, France, China all have different regulations, so thousands of changes. Westinghouse is doing the same now with Vogel, with Qingdao, and having the strong modularity philosophy. So these are things I think we have to embrace and take them very seriously. But it boils down to cost of capital. We can do many things to reduce that. And cost of equipment, we can do many things to reduce it. But again, I agree on the fellow panelists that spring is coming, and now I'm feeling the hints of summer already.
Many thanks for continuing on this thread. And in fact, to follow up on the question of risks, one of the key risks we haven't touched so much on so far is geopolitical risks. And of course, geopolitical risk impacts every industry, especially at the moment. But of course, for nuclear, it has always been there. So I have a question primarily for Boris, but for others as well. How do you see the role of international cooperation to ensure more resilient nuclear supply chain across OECD countries and reduce the risk of single supplier? Boris.
Michael, thank you for the question, and I think you're touching on the right thing. The highest risk for me in nuclear is not a technical risk, it's a political risk, a geopolitical risk, to give clarity on the market. The technical lifetime of a nuclear power plant nowadays is 80 years. Yeah? And when you say 10 years lead time, you need 90 years. That's nearly 100 years. An unimaginable long period of time where the business needs to. So that means we need to believe in the stability of our political environment. And I think the first step, and we all understood that, and the first step that has been made, I remember that very well, because we tried to support that. That was a Sapporo 5 meeting around the G7 meeting. 5 of the 7 were joining that. That was the UK, the US, France, Japan, and Canada, with 2 intentions. First intention, to actually create momentum for nuclear, because these countries thought we will not achieve climate targets without nuclear. That was the first intention. And the second intention was also to build up a more resilient global nuclear fuel supply chain. Yeah, and I would like to use this as an example now. So that was 3 or 4 years ago. And since then, the US has decided, and I think a very good example, okay, we have to give the industry clarity what we want from them. We are banning Russian fuel because of the Ukraine war. In Europe, we were not able to do the same for different reasons. Yeah? For different reasons. There were countries like Finland and Sweden who are very ethically correct and were trying to phase out as fast as possible. The Scandinavians, I think, are a role model there to phase out from nuclear fuel. We ourselves did pretty much the same on the first day when the war started. However, in the US, that was translated into political clarity. Why do I mention that? I can give you a lot more examples. We will need this political clarity to make investment decisions. It's true for the fuel cycle, but it's true also for the whole nuclear industry. This industry, because of the long-lasting lifetimes of our assets, this industry needs more geopolitical clarity than other industries. Yeah? A solar panel with a technical lifetime of 20 years does not need the same political clarity and political stability. And I think we are there in the world on the right direction, especially on the OECD, I'd say on the OECD countries, where there is now this commitment of tripling nuclear. The US have translated it now into 4 times as much nuclear than they already have. Whether that is realistic or not is another question. but you can see on the announcement that they had last week with Westinghouse and Cameco, okay, they're working on it. They're doing that, and signal by signal is coming. And I can promise you, the financial community read these signals. They are listening to what's going on there, and they are seeking for investment opportunities. And that is creating the momentum, that is creating the stability that we need.
At this point, I have to turn to Monsieur Montebourg as a former leading political figure in France. I'm sure this resonates with you.
Well, the Russian example is interesting because there is a big lesson. In fact, when after the Ukraine war was triggered, all the sanction authors said, we're going to put outside of the field of sanction the nuclear. And even for those countries who are making war together, they are saying, don't touch to the nuclear plants. So there is a kind of cleverness, even in harsh and hard wars, about nuclear. So we could have something of a special cooperation, and it does exist. I've been cooperating with China, when in charge. I used to work, and France historically worked with the United States, with Westinghouse in the past, when they built their first reactors. So in fact, we can have a kind of special Pacific field named nuclear, fuel, a cooperation in regulations, cooperation in supply chain. The only thing when people become aggressive is to become lovely with others. So let's gather with those who want not to make war, but to build together for the planet. And there are many people. So in fact, I think it's possible. And I would be a little bit optimistic on that ground. Thank you.
Markus, you wanted to add to it?
Yeah, quick follow-up. I do want to emphasize Boris's point about the geopolitical and political clarity. So in order to advance what we are talking about here, EU sticking to the 2040 and electrification targets is very important. And it's actually getting really close. It's only 15 years away. So imagine if we would now say that it doesn't hold. So all of these billions and trillions that we're supposed to invest, what's the anchor? And we see in the US what the political instability is doing. So tariffs and so on, difficult for investors. The other point I wanted to come back is the market design. So if we put the cat on the table, there are a couple of things that are bothering people. So one is the gas marginal pricing. And the other one is who pays for the grid services. Like, does anybody pay for the grid services, or do we just take it as granted? So the grid services point is a real one, and that's an issue that we need to really put on the table also in Europe, and ask that. So where is the system going? What services do we need, and how will they come to the market? Will we need public intervention to make sure we have adequacy, we have frequency, voltage, all the characteristics, reactive power that is needed? Our analysis says that we're not going to have all of it just automatically on a merchant basis. So going into a more intermittent system with a very high volatility, we need reactive power, and we need to take that seriously. On the short-term pricing, we think a lot about this in various instances. So getting assets dispatched in the most efficient way, the marginal pricing, from my point of view, makes absolute sense. So every hour, the right assets get dispatched. Then starting from that on monthly, quarterly, annual basis, our point is again going back to what do the customers need? And we're doing most of our, nowadays, we're not trading over the exchanges, but bilaterally with customers. So everything we sell is somehow tailor-made for the customers, and it's not linked to underlying gas or coal, but the specific characteristic that the customer wants on the contract. So I would strongly separate these two. short-term dispatching, and then long-term availability and volume and price and characteristic of power.
Many thanks, Markus. As we near the end of the panel, I have one more question for Mr. Park in particular. We talk a lot about building the next wave of nuclear reactors, but we also have maybe to start preparing for serial deployment. And to that extent, we're looking for your views on how do you think we can leverage lessons from the past to reduce cost, improve risk allocation and mitigation, and attract private investment for the subsequent units. And is there new sources of financing that you think can help us scale up nuclear deployment?
Yeah, most utility don't want to have such a kind of project. As you know, that project is, has many risks to be solved and to build on time within budget. And so for the park unit, the public sector should take the lead in financing due to high technological and regulatory risks. As multiple reactors are deployed, these risks decline and project bankability improves, encouraging private participation. During this transition, a robust public-private partnership model provides effective framework. This model combines government support with expanding private investment to ensure financial stability and investor confidence. Let me now turn to how the lessons learned from project can be used to reduce costs and attract private investment. When building additional units of the same reactor type, licensing can be done faster than that of FOAK. We can also utilize project management experience and the supply chains gained from the first unit. This learning curve effect could reduce construction costs and increase the possibility of project being completed on time within budget. As we build more reactors on time and within budget, nuclear power project will get more trust and attract more private investors. Now, I'd like to talk about the role of new financing sources. Traditionally, host government guarantee state-owned power utility, ECAs, have played a key role in financing. On the other hand, the participation of private financing was limited due to long construction period and uncertainty. However, nuclear energy recently became essential as a carbon-free power source and for energy security. Financial institutions have started to see nuclear power projects as new investment opportunities. For example, global commercial banks support tripling nuclear capacity by 2050, and the MDBs are returning to nuclear investment. Pension funds and private equity companies have started to join nuclear investment as well. Increasing new financing sources makes the project financially more stable. It helps us secure funds by diversifying their capital structures, and this will be a foundation to speed up the project. When nuclear business is combined with efficiency of the private sector, its risk will go down and the global nuclear market will expand. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Park. So we have 15 seconds left, but I think we still have time to close the panel, and I have an assignment for my panelists, which is to summarize in one sentence, and this is a strict assignment, what do you think are the single most important action or partnership needed to unlock the next wave of nuclear investment? Jasbir.
So from an investment point of view, the visibility of the fleet that will be built out, indicated by the government, is essential.
Issam, one sentence?
Well, actually, all the messages are now live in the EY report that we published 2 minutes ago on LinkedIn, so you can download it directly and have all our messages. Thank you.
You use your time wisely.
Yeah, in order to promote new investment, host government should have active leadership and regulatory policy consistency. Also, EPC contractor, such as KHNP, EDF, or everything else, needs to make an effort to complete the project on time within BG. Thank you.
Boris, you optimistic?
3 sentences. So the first thing is up to us ourselves. Deliver, deliver, deliver on time, on budget, on quality. Then we create the track record that is needed. The second one is we need to listen to societies, talk to governments, because it's a very political industry to create the stability. And the third one, innovation is key. I strongly believe in SMRs, RMRs. Thank you.
Thank you. Markus?
I'll be a rebel as well, so two points from me. So the key one is robust risk-sharing mechanisms between governments, utilities, and suppliers, investors, to create the framework for new investment. The second point is Arnaud's point about a bit of optimism.
Mr. Montebourg, the final word.
I would say the same. To share the risk between the state, it has a part to play, the consumers, the price of electricity, and the operators. And the supply chain is the most fragile of those because there are few and we need them, and delays, schedules, costs are to be under control. So let's help them. That's my point. Thank you so much.
Well, the message has been received loud and clear. Many thanks to all our panelists. Maybe we can give them another round of applause. And to W&E as a host for this wonderful conference. So with that, winter hasn't arrived in Paris. We still have a good Indian summer, so please enjoy the rest of W&E and your stay in Paris.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this panel, and thank you for great moderation. And now, in 15 minutes, we're going to have a very interesting subject. I spent 4 years myself, the past 4 years in this field, and it's fusion energy. So not fission, but fusion. So in 15 minutes, we will have Matteo Barbarino here, who will moderate it from the International Atomic Energy Agency. So please be back in 15 minutes, which would be around 11:15. Thank you, and thanks once again for the panel. Thank you.